today we start part E of Module 2, the last part of Module 2, Introduction to JavaScript. So this is a very important topic, JavaScript. In this part, we just learn some basic information about JavaScript. After that, we need to spend a lot of time to study more useful features of JavaScript. Part E.1, Getting Started with JavaScript. First, we want to look at brief history of JavaScript. Let me draw a timeline and put some important milestones related to JavaScript technology. The first one, starting from 1993, there is a browser called a Mosaic. This Mosaic browser, why it is important? Because it is the first browser with graphical user interface. GUI, G-U-I, graphical user interface. Mosaic was the first one. Let me describe the situation a little bit at that time, 1993, at that time. We know the internet was created. What time? Based in this class, we learned, right? 1969, right? So after that, so then many years, the web, 1989, right? 1989. Yeah. After that, people start to send data, send information, distribute, through the network, through the internet to different places. But at that time, how people get news, how people read articles, how people read, information. I still remember at that time how I read the news. Usually we use FTP. Okay, FTP. So we use Unix machine. Because at that time Unix machine was very popular. All right. Although some people had PC, but in university, most people use Unix machine. At that time, in order to get news, you need to go to some FTP site. So you have the address, FTP to, certain address. So you go there, okay? So you select the article, the documents, PDF file, some, at that time may not be PDF, PS file, probably, PostScript, PS file. So you download, okay? FTP download. Okay? And for some of the software, you don't have the graphical user interface to download. You need to type command. In Unix, you type FTP, get, put, download the documents to local drive. So then you can, print out and read the news. At that time, that was a common way people read the news. Then at that time, 1993, this graphical user interface, the first browser can display. You do not need to download explicitly. You do not need to type command. So you do not need to print out to read the news, right? So you can read the news directly on web pages. So that is a really big, important milestone on web technologies. So that's 1993. After that, 1994, an important web browser, Netscape Navigator, quickly replaced Mosaic. Yeah. Because this Navigator, Netscape Navigator, when you use it, so you feel much better than Mosaic. The interface looks really nice, much better than Mosaic, and the functionality, the features, much more powerful. Yeah. So people will change to, Navigator quickly. That's 1994, right? After that, 1995, Netscape. Yeah, but because at that time, Netscape already dominant the market. Yeah. No competitors, Mosaic cannot compete. Yeah. So dominate the market. So then the Netscape team, they felt if they can only display static information, so that's not very good, not very useful. So they want to put a dynamic content in their web pages. So for that reason, then they want to create a scripting language to do the dynamic content. So they used two methods, two ways, two directions to do this. One from Java, because at that time, 1995, Java was already, very popular. Yeah, actually, at that time, Java was very hot. Although it was the early stage of Java, but Java was so successful at that time. Yeah, so for industry, so everybody talked about Java everywhere, in all the conferences, technology conferences. People always talk about Java. Okay? So their first ideas, can they, try to use the Java success and, try to implement Java in some way to do the scripting language. So that's the first idea. Second idea from another scripting language, so not very well known, called Scheme. Yeah, Scheme. Yeah, so not many people know it. Yeah, yeah. So then they try, these two routes. Okay, these two routes. After they tried, none of the routes was successful. Yeah, yeah. So later, they changed the course. So they want to develop from scratch. Yeah. For the scripting language. Yeah. They need to create a new scripting language. Yeah. But this new scripting language, although it was a brand new one, but borrows some features, properties from Java. Yeah. The syntax, some of the syntax, the styles, similar to Java. Yeah. But the structure, the foundation, completely different from Java. Nothing to do with Java. The foundation, nothing to do with the Java. Yeah. All right. So then, after they create it, yeah. So this idea implement quite successful. Yeah. Then they need to give a name to the scripting language. Yeah. First, they call it Mocha. Mocha, the first name of this scripting language. Later, so they felt not very good, so they want to change to a different name. So they call it LiveScript. LiveScript. Yeah. Then after some time, after only 3 months using this new name, they felt so they need to change to another name. Okay? So then they call it JavaScript. That was the first time they called it JavaScript. From the origin, so you can see they borrowed many features. Later when we learn, so you can see many properties, language requirements, very similar to Java's. Yeah. So for this reason, naturally, they connect to Java. So they call it JavaScript. All right. Now, later, after so many years, especially recently, JavaScript was so successful. Right now, the JavaScript dominates the web technology client side. It dominates the client side. Yeah. Okay. Extremely important. Yeah. So later, when people look back, thinking about why it is called JavaScript, it is completely different from Java, but it is still called JavaScript. What's the reason behind it? Yeah. Many people thought it is just a market ploy, because at that time, Java was really hot. At that time, Java was treated as the internet programming language. Big giant internet programming language was extremely hot. The reason Netscape JavaScript team, they use this name because they want to, get some attention by using this Java name. Yeah. So later, many people feel it was just a market ploy. Yeah. For quite some time, I thought in this way. I also, I believed it was true, but recently, so after I studied the history, so I realized it's not. It is not a market ploy. It is a natural name because of this natural name. Yeah. The reason, so it can get a lot of attention through this Java term. Yeah. So that's by accident. Yeah. That's by accident. But at that time, yeah, the reason is they borrowed a lot of features from Java. Yeah. Here, by the way, why Java was so successful at that time. So there is one big reason. Here, I want to mention a little bit. One big reason is in Java, there is one special technology called applet. Applet technology. So you can embed Java program in web browsers. Web browser can run applets. Applets. At that time, the reason it is very hard to do dynamic content inside web pages. The applet provide a very powerful way to embed Java inside web pages. So that was the biggest reason people adopt this technology quickly because of the applet. But right now, not many people use applet. Yeah. It is rare. Still, some people use Java applets. Yeah. But the market share extremely small. Yeah. I can say less than 1%. Yeah. For on the web pages of whole internet, whole web world, web pages using applets based on, I just estimate. I didn't see any statistics based on my impression, my personal experience, less than 1%. but not zero. Yeah, sometimes you can still see a few pages using applets. Yeah. All right. So anyway, yeah. So that's the JavaScript name. After that, Internet Explorer, Microsoft in 1995. So they feel web browser, that was extremely important tool in web technologies. So they jump into the, competition. Yeah. So they create this Internet Explorer web browser, 1995. Yeah. And then later, so they quickly grabbed the largest share of the market because they use the Windows power. Yeah. Every Windows machine installed this Internet Explorer, but not Netscape Navigator. Netscape Navigator, people need to download. Yeah. But most people, so if they are not familiar with the, web technologies, they do not know Netscape. So that's why the Internet Explorer quickly grabbed the largest market share to 90 something. Yeah, 90. Yeah. Quickly grow to 90% of the market. Yeah. So later, Microsoft, so they don't want to use that JavaScript. So they create their own product similar to JavaScript. So they call it JScript. But the features, the functionalities, everything look very similar to JavaScript. Yeah. But slightly different. So they call it JScript. Yeah. Try to compete, try to get a market share. Yeah. Because they have the 90% of the browser market. So definitely JScript was used, in that 90% of the browser market. So dominant market. Yeah. So the JavaScript did not have a lot of chance to be used by the web developers. Yeah. Next milestone. Yeah. Then another important thing, Netscape Navigator team, so they submit their JavaScript technology to an European technology community. So they make it as a standard in the community, JavaScript. So they call this ECMA script. Yeah. Yeah. Make as a industry standard. Yeah. So Microsoft, so they, so they still try to promote their own JScript. So they didn't want to cooperate with the, international technology community, ECMA. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But these two in the competition, yeah. At that time, the market favors JScript at that time, yeah, because of the market share. Yeah. Later, another important milestone, 2004. Yeah. And in this year, Netscape Navigator team, they couldn't compete with the Internet Explorer, so they drop it. So they drop it. So they kill that Navigator browser. Yeah. But the same team, Netscape Navigator, the same team, they create a new browser. Yeah. So they formed a new organization, Mozilla Firefox. They had the technology, so they can quickly create another powerful web browser. so they can compete with the Internet Explorer. Yeah. And this browser was very successful. Yeah. Although people need to download it after they bought a Windows machine, they still need to download it. Yeah. Not automatically installed on the Windows machine, yeah. But many people did it. Yeah. So it quickly got 30% of the market share. So that's very important. 30%, pretty significant. Yeah. All right. So that is a big important. So that make the JavaScript had a chance to compete with JavaScript because you have 30%. So people cannot ignore. Web developers cannot ignore this market share, right? Yeah. So people, start to use it. When web developers develop web pages, they need to test it in Firefox. Okay. Yeah. All right. Then another big thing happened in 2005. So one person, he did an extremely important thing. He put several technologies together, and he created this term, Ajax. Ajax. The main component of Ajax is JavaScript. The main component, JavaScript. Okay, yeah. Ajax, JavaScript. Yeah. So the Ajax, in a web page, you can use JavaScript to get information from the server without doing submit action. Click, without need to, without initiate an event, a special event. We know on a web page, when you need to do something, you need to start some event. Click a button, click a link, right? Do something. Then you can send a request to the server. But Ajax allows you, so when you type, whatever you do, when you do something, any action, not necessarily some special, event. Every time when you have some action, so you can call back-end server to retrieve data. That feature, that property, so really important for web technologies because people can develop more responsive web applications. You do not need to wait. Okay? So when you work, then you can quickly get response using the data in the server side. So that's extremely important. Yeah. But the technology is so simple. The technology, you just put right pieces together, then you can do it. Yeah. So for our class, at the later part of this class, I will talk about this Ajax technology. Very simple, but very powerful. Yeah. So then at that time, Ajax was quickly adopted by the web technology community. So powerful. Yeah. So the next milestone, 2008, Google Chrome. So Google Chrome was created and quickly grabbed the big market share. Okay, but that's not the most important thing to make JavaScript stand out. Google, in their Chrome, so they rely on JavaScript a lot. Actually, they rely on this Ajax technology a lot because a lot of the nice features, they need very responsive, reactions. Yeah, they need that. Yeah. So when people do the online search, after they type a word, part of the word, so they use Ajax to quickly, look for the matching phrases, from the back end. So give a list of suggestions. Google Suggest, they call that Google Suggest. It is a very simple application. Yeah. We will see that example easily. Very short code, you can do that. Okay, but the result is surprising. The users love that experience. So when you type something, you get suggestions, so you can select. But because sometimes you cannot memorize things, exactly, right? Nobody can memorize, some spelling, some exact. Sometimes people just hear that word, they do not know exact spelling, so they want to try a little bit. So the Google Suggest will give the closest match. That feature relies on Ajax. Okay, all right. Then there is another important feature relies on Ajax, Google Map. Google Map, so important, right? Yeah. So when people do the map search, so then when the map is displayed, people want to move the cursor around to see other places. It must be responsive. So when you move the cursor, you want to see the new map immediately, new area, regions in the map immediately. You don't want to click some button to see the map change, right? So that's not a good experience. So you want to move quickly, so that feature must be implemented using Ajax. Okay, so for that reason, Ajax was extremely important in web technologies. Then that make the JavaScript extremely important. So you cannot do Ajax without JavaScript. Yeah. So for that reason, so now client side dynamic content completely dominated by JavaScript. Now you cannot see JScript. So nobody uses JScript, right? Yeah, and any other scripting language at the client side. Yeah. All right. So that's pretty much the short history of JavaScript, the background we need to get started. Yeah. Next, let me just give you a quick overview about JavaScript. Yeah. First, there are three parts of JavaScript: the core part, client side, and also server-side JavaScript. But the server-side, the market is very small. Yeah. So right now, the best one at the server-side, Node.js. This technology currently is the biggest player at the server-side JavaScript. Yeah. So the core, so the basic Java foundation part, so that can be used at both client side and the server side. But at the client side, you need to add a lot of features specific to the client side, the browser. Then server side, you need to do typical things related to the server side. So there is a separation here. Because the market share for server side extremely small. Okay? Yeah, very, very small. Yeah, too small. Yeah. So for that reason, in this class, we just talk about client-side JavaScript. Okay? Yeah. So we won't touch that server-side JavaScript. All right. Now, so let's look at other properties of JavaScript. All right. First, JavaScript is a lightweight, not heavyweight. So that means usually when you write JavaScript code, Usually people expect to write small code segment for one particular feature. Okay, another feature, another small code segment, yeah, just like that, yeah, lightweight. So not a heavy, big, processing. Although, if you like, you can do that, but not very common. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Another thing, interpreted programming language. So we know we do not compile JavaScript code. Interpret it. The web browser will interpret. So translate to machine language directly without compilation. Yeah. All right. JavaScript, Java, two different. Yeah. So we know that here. The reason I put this property here, I just want to emphasize, because for many beginners or for many people who are not technical people or who are not familiar with the computing technologies, they don't know this. Yeah. So it is very common people treat JavaScript and Java the same thing. Yeah. So so that's why here I emphasize. Yeah. So when you have this situation, so you can explain to those people. I had this experience, so I explained to many people many times. Yeah. All right. It is supported by all modern web browsers. Otherwise, if a web browser does not support JavaScript, it is useless. Okay, so that's simple. Yeah. All right. Execution environment web browser. Yeah. Yeah. So this is a simple fact. Okay, but with this background, when we write JavaScript code, so we will imagine the execution environment. Yeah. So the web browser. Yeah. So that's the way we understand a lot of behaviors of our JavaScript code. Yeah. All right. So you do not download the software, right? Like Java. How do you use Java to do programming? You need to download the Java, right? Install, yeah. But for JavaScript, you do not, because we have a web browser, so we can run JavaScript. Okay. All right. Yeah. JavaScript embedded in HTML documents, either physically or logically. Embed. Yeah. So it's HTML code, so then we can put some special tags, right? JavaScript. Then we insert, so we can write JavaScript code. But what's physically and logically? Physically means you can see the code directly there. Okay. Yeah. So we can call inline or internal. Yeah. So these two cases we can call physically. Inline. Yeah. Actually may not be inline. Yeah, because it embedded in the location near the place you want to add dynamic content. Yeah, may not be strictly inline. So it's better called internal. Okay. Internal. Yeah. Okay. So then logically, yeah, sometimes it is not convenient to put a lot of Java code in your HTML document. So you want to create external file to put your JavaScript code, but you connect external file with this HTML document. In that case, external way. External way. So in our textbook, it calls the logically. Okay? Yeah. So this is using from our textbook. Physically, logically. Yeah. So you just know the meaning. Okay? Yeah. All right. JavaScript is not a class-based object-oriented language. If you want to compare the way used with Java, Java is a class-based. Yeah. So you can define your own classes, yeah. But JavaScript is not. Although people also call it object-oriented language, it just uses the object style. You have an object, yeah. The object dot, so you access the methods inside the object, yeah. But That's typically when you use the features, you use object-oriented, but you do not write your own classes. You do not, just like Java, so you can define your own classes. It's not that. Yeah. The reason is we want to make the JavaScript as simple as possible. We do not want to make it heavyweight. Okay? Yeah. So the designer want to make it lightweight. Yeah. So try to avoid the complexity of complicated classes, inheritance, polymorphism, too complicated. So that's not appropriate for JavaScript. Yeah. All right. Next, JavaScript can change HTML content. This one makes the JavaScript extremely useful. You can change the content based on the business requirements. So this, you can make the HTML dynamic. Okay, so this property, you can make HTML dynamic. Yeah. All right. Can change HTML attribute values. So you can take a lot, you can do a lot of controls on your HTML elements. Yeah. One way through changing attribute values. Yeah. So in some situations, we need to do this. Yeah. And change CSS style, HTML styles, using CSS. Change color, change font size, or, change all different kinds of properties. We can use JavaScript to change. Yeah. So you can see, very powerful. Yeah. All right. Then for a special case, can hide, show HTML elements, because that's just the changing, CSS properties. Yeah. CSS properties, you can do that. Remember, display property, right? Display property from none to block, right? So, or from block to none. If you do that change, you hide. From none to block, you show it. You can do a lot of things. Okay. All right. The last one, client-side JavaScript cannot replace all server-side computing. That's for sure. Yeah. After we learn all the capabilities, so powerful JavaScript, some people may like to think about, can we use JavaScript to do everything we need in a website? It's not. You cannot. You have to do a lot of work at the server side, not the client side. One most important thing you need to do at the server side, database. Database. You have to do it at the server side. You should not do it at the client side, because for data security, you don't want to give any chance. You do not want to expose your important data to outside people. Okay? Yeah. The browser, the client side. So, yeah. So do not try to replace. Yeah. So nobody even think about it. Yeah. All right. So that's our first video, getting started with JavaScript.